Hello, my name is Jack Meyer. I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. Today I have the privilege of interviewing Mr. Leonard A. Bosserman on November 2nd, 2006 at the Blue Ash Branch Library. Our camera operator today is Mr. Joel Cornelli. Mr. Bosserman, we really appreciate your coming in and volunteering to be a part of this program. And why don't you just start right in and give us sort of a chronological rundown on your early life, how you got in the military, what you did while you were on active duty.
All right, my name is Leonard Bosserman. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, North College Hill, actually. I'll start in 1943. I was a senior in North College Hill High School. A lot of the fellows had already enlisted. Several were waiting for graduation. They had already were signed into the Air Force. I knew that when I was 18 I would be called into the draft, and I wanted to become active. The Navy had a program, it's called the V-12. I thought that was a very interesting program. They gave you 3 years of college education. You came out an ensign. I knew because of my eyes that I couldn't get into the Air Force in any kind of flying capacity. So I took the test for the V-12, passed it, had good grades on it, and was in 2 weeks offered the physical examination. I went down, took the physical, passed everything until the last thing, and that was on eyes. So I was flunked out. I had lived on eating raw carrots for 2 weeks, but it didn't help enough. And I knew that I would be drafted. I didn't know for sure what service to get into. So I took a job with Standard Oil Company and worked at a service station at Hamilton and Van Zandt. Van Zandt is now Galbraith Road. While I was working there was a fellow in the Army that worked downtown in a recruiting capacity. And I told him about flunking out of the Navy V-12 program, and he said, don't worry, the Army has an A-12 program, the ASTP. And he said, you're just out of high school, you have good grades, you'll pass that, they'll put you in into college. So when I was 18, that was in December 1944, I went down to Wyoming, Ohio, where the draft board was, signed up. The lady said, we'll have you in the service in no time. Well, she was right, because a month later, I was sworn in, went to Fort Thomas. A couple of days later, well, I had taken all the tests at Fort Thomas, had good grades. And about 3 days later, they loaded everybody onto a train and headed out. And I knew that something was wrong. I wasn't going to college because some of these fellows coming in couldn't even read or write. So anyway, 2 days later, we ended up at Camp Swift, Texas. I found out that we were all in the 102nd Infantry Division. It was called the Ozark Division. Began our basic training in Camp Swift. February, it was very cold, windy. The only place I ever saw that you walked in sand every day, but when it rained, you were in mud up to your ankles. So I got along very well in basic training. I was young, I was in good physical condition. some of the older fellas had more trouble walking and on hikes than I did, but I got along very well. We had good food until one day I was on an unloading detail. They had this truck come in, and it was, all the tags on it was Army lamb. The only thing is, those were 6 feet long, and it ended up, it was goat from northern Texas. This was so strong that you could smell the camp 3 miles before you ever got back to camp. It was almost impossible to eat. Everybody ate hamburgers, lived off of hamburgers and things. They tried to fix that Army goat in any way they could, but it just smelled, it was too strong. Some of the other things there, we had, I enjoyed the range practice. I shot expert with the M1, with the BAR, Browning automatic rifle, with 45 caliber pistol, but only shot sharpshooter with the carbine. We went through, had a lot of good training, good educational training at Camp Swift. We had a lot of German prisoners that were there, prisoners of war. And they kind of laughed, they were living better than we were. But that was a good thing, because they were living good, because Americans that were taken prisoner were treated better than Russians or any other group, because they were treated, they treated the Germans very badly. One of the things that was a little bit funny, the Germans had never seen the armadillo, and they called that a Panzerschwein. That's, pardon me.
The tank pig.
All right. Toward the end of our basic training, we had a visit from, I think it was Henry Stimson, who was secretary of the War Department. And our platoon was chosen as the division division honor guard. So we got to run a problem for the secretary. It was the first time any of us had actually been under artillery fire, which was firing ahead of us. It was a good experience, and everybody learned from that what it was going to be like. And at the end of basic training, we started, all the division was loaded onto trains, and when I was in, one afternoon, stopped in, it happened to be Union Terminal at Cincinnati. Of course, I knew where we were, and my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Nochek, came to me and he said, "Here's some money, I want you to go up and get some papers for us." He said, "You know where we are?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "But don't get caught." Well, I got the papers, but when I got to the hall where the phones were, our division MPs were already there. So I never got to call home. We moved on to Fort Dix, New Jersey, where we had additional advanced training on, especially on German weapons. And did a lot of night maneuvering using compass, things of that nature. We were there a short time. Let's see, I did have a one-week furlough back home in July, and at that particular week, the Philadelphia transit strike started, and our division was put on the buses, streetcars, to keep the transit running. After I got back We were soon moved up New Jersey tracks to Camp Kilmer. Camp Kilmer was the POE port of embarkation for the troops going to Europe. And we were only there, I think the third day. We had to, it was company requirement that you couldn't leave. We were all loaded onto trains at night. During the night, we moved up and crossed the Hudson River on ferry boats. Everything was covered, concealed, no lights or anything. And we had to go below deck on the ship. It was, they ended up as one of the victory ships, Kaiser victory ships. The next morning, the ship was bouncing around on the waves. Went outside, and we couldn't even see land at that time. We were so far out. On this convoy that we were in, any troop ships were in the center. To the outside were freighters, tankers, everything. And there were numerous Navy destroyer escorts, corvettes running around with sonars checking for U-boats. But in that convoy, it seemed that as far as you could see in any direction were ships. It was an immense convoy. I think we were in that for about 12 days across the South Atlantic. The weather was ideal. I think that when we left, it was rough because it was probably the tail end of a hurricane that we were going through, or some rough weather. But the weather across the South Atlantic was good enough that most of us stayed up on deck day and night, slept on blankets, played cards, and they had one recording that they kept playing continually, and it was a new one. I had never heard it. It was Tommy Dorsey's Opus 1, which was a new recording. I still think of that ship whenever I hear that record. After about, I think it was the 12th day, we pulled into the harbor at Cherbourg. We were told that we were the first ships coming in, but the docking facilities had been destroyed by the Germans, so that we had to unload the ship off of rope cargo nets down to a barge, and then we're taken into to the shore on landing boats. We were taken by truck up to the hedgerow country. We had a hedgerow. It was cool, rainy most of the time, a lot of mud. We did get to hike out to see a large part of the Atlantic Wall. Some of the fortifications there were unbelievable that they had to prevent landings. We were only there probably about a week, maybe 10 days.
Do you recall what month it was you landed in Cherbourg?
I'm not sure.
It was after D-Day, right?
Oh yes, it was after D-Day. It was, see, we left in, I'm going to say about the first part of August, so I think that we landed in Cherbourg sometime in August.
Yeah, okay, a couple months after D-Day.
Right, after D-Day. While we were there, they were moving, yeah, it had to be September before we moved out of France, or that part of France near Cherbourg, and moved by rail. And it seemed like we were on this train on 40 and 8 cars for about a week, and just unbelievable. You had to jump out to get exercise. You'd walk along, walk around, and when they blew the whistle 5 times, everybody jumped back in the 40 and 8 car. And you never knew which direction it was going to go, because it would start and stop and just continually changing direction.
Can you explain what a 40 and 8 car is? Is this the number of axles or wheels or?
He's just a kid.
All right, yeah. All right, a 40 and 8 car in Europe is like a box car, but it's only 4 wheels, and it's they used them in World War I. It'll haul 40 men or 8 mules, and it's a small car, and there wasn't room enough for everybody to sit down. You had part of you had to stand. Nobody could ever lay down and sleep all when they wanted to. It was very uncomfortable. That's the reason when it stopped, you would get out to get some exercise. And it seemed like we were on that thing for about a week, just going several hundred miles across France. When we got to the end of the line that the train was on, we were put on trucks, and I think this was we were taken into Belgium. And from a point there in Belgium, everything else we walked. We were marched into Holland, and let's see, we did have a shower one time at in Herleen, Holland. There was a mine that had excellent showers for their miners, and we got to use that. So I had one shower from the time, I guess when I left New Jersey, really. We had to march or walk from there on. One night, I know we walked, they said 37 miles in the rain, and still had full pack, horseshoe, blanket, roll. And the farther you walk, the more water that blanket absorbed, the heavier it got, until finally you were just about dead from walking. I think a lot of them didn't make it all the way. They had to be picked up later. We were put into positions on the line, actually to relieve, and I think it was the 30th Division. We moved into these, their foxholes for a couple of days while they got a break. Then they came back and we moved to another position and relieved the men there.
So during either of those times, was there combat or contact with the enemy?
All right, we did not have, there was artillery fire, but no advancing on either part while we were in those holding positions. But after we were moved to a place, and we were notified that we were going to be moving through this division that was dug in and attacking a village. And we had casualties, but we took the village. The next day it seemed that we were taking another village. And things were going well for us, even though we had casualties. There were men killed, there were men wounded. And then Jerry moved in there, the 10th SS Panzer Division, and once we got in them, they were tough. They weren't giving up. Before that, we had run into just average infantry, their Wehrmacht divisions. These people seemed like every company had one SS trooper with them, and that trooper his job was to keep any of them from giving up. And as soon as you found out who he was, a lot of times they would wave a white flag to get people to come think that they were giving up, and as soon as you got close enough, they would open up with a machine pistol. Anyway, it got a lot tougher when we were fighting just the SS troopers. Let's see, on the 1st of December, we were attacked, a larger town. It wasn't a city, but it was a larger town of Leonard, Germany. We started moving, and it was several miles away that we were walking and spread out, and we were getting a lot of artillery fire. We were getting pretty close to this town, getting up almost to the backyard of the first house, and I'd say all hell broke loose. We were under our own artillery time fire. Apparently the artillery liaison officer that had been with us had been hit or killed, whatever, but nevertheless, we had advanced too fast. And as soon as that, it was freezing, but anyway, it was, with that time fire, it was just hot. And it lasted, well, it seemed like a long time, but actually it was probably only a minute. And I know I heard men yelling for help. And that day, that was on a Friday, December the 1st, I had our platoon radio over my shoulder. And as soon as I got up, I dropped down into a shell hole, or a bomb crate or whatever it was, looking at this house that I was getting ready to attack to see if there was any fire coming from it. And the platoon sergeant, Nochek, yelled for the platoon radio to call back to get that time fire stopped. And as soon as he called, I started out, and I heard it just that quick. I heard a shell coming in. I didn't find out until later it was a German mortar shell. Anyway, at that time I was knocked out, unconscious, and Frank Ossing, who was in the same squad with me, Frank was from Columbus, Ohio. He came up to get the radio and told me later, after the war, when I found out just what had happened, he had pulled the warhead of this mortar shell out of my left foot. I was pretty well cut up. I had a piece of shrapnel had gone across my chest. I still have some wounds from that. Another piece went under my arm. I have nerve damage from that. Another piece hit the entrenching tool. It was on my left side on my belt. It destroyed that. Thank goodness it hit it, because otherwise it would have cut me in two. Another piece of shrapnel cut a rifle in two to my right. There was another soldier had gotten in, jumped into the shell hole. Anyway, Frank apparently came up, took the radio, came back, put sulfonamide powder on some of my wounds, and covered me with my raincoat, the Army raincoat. That was something, well, everybody kept their raincoat because if it was cold, you would cover with it and still retained heat underneath there. Anyway, the fighting went on in this village all Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning it seemed to lift. Now I was in and out of consciousness, so I lost track of time.
You lay there that whole time?
Yeah. It was freezing, but, and my whole left side felt like it was on fire. On Sunday morning, the heavy artillery firing in that village had lifted. You could hear it in the distance, but I didn't know if the Americans had won that, if our division had won the town, or if it was taken by the Germans. But anyway, it must have been sometime late on Sunday morning. The sun came out, and I heard a couple of men, or some men talking, and I yelled for help. They came, and I imagine it was a burial detail that had gotten there. And as soon as they saw me, they started yelling for medics and for an ambulance. And I remember them getting me on a litter to put me in the ambulance, and a medic gave me a shot of, well, the normal shot that they gave. It knocked me out because I don't remember them getting me in the ambulance. Now that was on Sunday. When I came to, I was laying in a bed. It was in a tent hospital. I looked down and I could see that my leg was in a cast. I could see my toes and I could feel my toes moving. Of course, I was still everything, sore, hurting everywhere. A nurse saw me moving a little bit and came up and asked how I was feeling. I said, well, I'm hurting, but it's nice to be laying in a bed after months. And she talked to me for a little while, said, how old are you? And I said, what day is today? And she said, this is Monday, December the 4th, 1944. And I said, I'm 19 today. What a way to celebrate a birthday. But I was alive. She said, happy birthday, is there anything we can get for you? And I'm right-handed, so everything was bandaged up, taped, everything on my left side. So I said, yes, could you get a piece of paper and pencil that I could write a note to send home? So she did. And from that, let's see, I was moved to another hospital at Liège, Belgium. And I don't know what day it was, but it was in December. I was put on a train and sent to Paris. And at that time, must have been about the same time that the Ardennes breakthrough, Battle of the Bulge started, and I was in a hospital in Paris overnight. And I know the nurses were all excited because the Glenn Miller Army Air Force Band was coming to Paris that next day. And the next day I was put on a plane, flew from Paris to England, put in a hospital in England.
Were you on a litter all this time?
Yes, yeah. So, and it was dark, rainy, cloudy, so I never saw any part of Paris. Anyway, I was in a hospital there in England for a short time, moved to another hospital, and during that time, I remember every morning a surgeon come in, and he knew that there was something in my foot because it kept draining. There was, it wouldn't heal, it just continually drained. He knew there was something in there, and he came in every morning, and he had, I guess it was some kind of like a round-nosed scissors, and probed into my foot every morning. And I mean, I held onto that bed rail, like no medication or anything, nothing to knock the pain. And I was in that hospital until, must have been about the middle of April. I was put on a ship. At that time,
Let me interrupt a minute. Was
Yes.
that, just out of curiosity, was that the flight that Glenn Miller didn't complete? Or do you recall?
Well, all right.
Because he
No,
was-
no, all right, the band came over after
Yeah,
Glenn Miller left. He flew over on a small plane,
oh, I see.
and they came over several days later. Now, he must have gone down while I was still in that hospital in Liège, Belgium. But this is what the nurses told me, that the orchestra was coming in
I see,
the
okay.
next day. And at that time, they didn't know that that Glenn Miller was missing.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
Back
All
on
right,
the way home.
Okay, all right, and April, I was on a ship, and it was a troop ship, but I think it was only carrying wounded casualties back. Now, at that time, I was on crutches and still had a cast on, and my foot continued to drain. I know it was April, and I believe Franklin Roosevelt died on April the 12th, and I was on the ship on the Atlantic at that time.
You want to stop a minute?
All right, I was on that ship in April. We landed at Boston. I was put in a car. Several of us were ambulance patients put in a car and attached to a train, and our car ended up in Camp Atterbury, Indiana. At that time, you're checked in, all the paperwork is done, you're issued complete uniforms, everything new, like you just came into the Army again. And I guess that was a Saturday late afternoon when we got into Camp Atterbury, and after I was checked in, it was evening, and I asked the captain, how soon can I get a Class A pass? And he said, oh, anytime you want one. And I said, could I get it today? And he said, yeah, but where are you going today? And I said, home. So it was about 11 o'clock Saturday night when I got out, took a bus, got out at the gate of Camp Atterbury and started thumbing. Now I was on crutches, had a cast up above my knee. Car came along, picked me up, and I forget how far. He took me, another car picked me up, and a third car picked me up, dropped me off right in front of my home on Van Zandt. Each time, we continued to talk, telling where I was going, where I had been, what I was doing. And it was early Sunday morning when he dropped me off right in front of my home in North College Hill. My dad was up. I went to ring the doorbell. They had no idea that I was actually back in the United States. They had no idea where I was at that time. So actually, I was in hospitals, moved down to Louisville, to an Army General Hospital there, and then I spent most of the time at Newton D. Baker General Hospital at Martinsburg, West Virginia. And I had several furloughs home, but anyway, my foot continued to drain. Thank goodness for penicillin. I was on that for months. Every 2 hours, got a penicillin shot. Finally, whatever it was, must have worked out. It was probably wool and, well, sand, leather. It's hard telling. When that thing went into my foot, it broke bones, but they wouldn't heal until it drained for over a year. Finally, I was discharged from Newton D. Baker General Hospital in June 1946. So that's my story. I'll say this, that I was very proud. I thank God that I was born in the United States. I was proud to have served. I saw a lot of men, good men, give up their lives for this country. It is one of the most honorable things that anyone could ever do. So.
What did you have in mind for your life when you were discharged in 1946?
All right, I wanted to go to college. At that time, when I got out, I wanted to go to engineering school at UC. It was filled. I couldn't get in there, but I did get into Miami University. Now, I had trouble walking. I still have an injury in my hand. The other injuries have cleared up. Walking was a problem, and getting from one class and one building to another was difficult. So I put in 1 year and then dropped out. It was just too hard to do. So I took a job. I think it was called on-the-job training for veterans. Actually, it was with Hyde Park Lumber Company. I was there for, well, and then I took a building estimating course, which was a night school at UC. And I moved on to different offers. I got into building estimating and into sales, continued and into several different lumber companies. I ended up as general manager of Queen City Lumber Company down on Spring Grove Avenue. I left there, became 50% owner of Nesbitt Lumber in Loveland, sold that, went back to sales. So I worked until I was 74. And in fact, I enjoyed working.
So you're in the building industry then?
Yes, right. Until I retired at age 74. But I enjoyed working. And there again, I thank God that I was able to live through that, come back, and I never got a degree, but I went to enough classes, probably more than if I would have taken the time in college.
Now, you carried that cane all your life then, huh?
No, actually it got better, and I didn't use the cane for years, but now it's down to the point where, and I have a lot of arthritis, and I think it all started from the wound. This arthritis seems to follow wounds, and of course I had quite a few there, so I'm back to where I have to use a cane. I do, as I said, I still have a nerve injury. When they discharged me out of the hospital, they asked if I wouldn't stay so that they could work on this nerve injury, and I said, no, I've put in enough time here after 18 months in hospitals. But as soon as it gets cold, I have to wear a glove.
Have you had to have any major procedures in the intervening time?
No, thank goodness, no.
Your generation seems very calm about not fulfilling a dream like yours was to go to college and go to engineering school. Do you see a difference between your generation and subsequent generations as far as being frustrated? I just wanted to go to work and do something. That seems to be what we've heard so far, as opposed to my dream escaped me and I've never forgotten and I've never forgiven myself, and on and on.
All right, you learned by living through the Depression that you could put up with a lot of things. You could accept certain things. Now, some of the people that came back had a lot of mental injuries. Fortunately, I did not. I was able to live through that and had the desire to learn rather than to remember those things. And that's the reason I said for years I never talked about it. But I think that living through the Depression had a lot to do with it. You learn values that you don't learn now. At that time, you worked for, if it was 10 cents an hour, you were appreciated. You could buy 6 bottles of Coca-Cola for a quarter. You could buy a pound of coffee for a quarter. So money, actually at that time, just change meant something. And you learned that. You didn't waste. Anything that you had, you learned to use, to keep, and to get all the value out of it that you could. And I think that had a lot to do with the attitude of people going into the war and living through it. So.
Now, how did you meet your wife? Did you know her before?
No. No. I had a friend who had gone with her, and I was home on a furlough, on crutches and cast on my foot, and I met her. I was with him and I met her, and they wanted to go out bowling that night. Well, I couldn't bowl, and so he knew another girl, called her, had a date with her. We went out, and it was probably close to a year later when I saw her again. I called her, got a date with her, and then we dated after that and finally married. Now we've been married about 58 and a half years, so.
And you said you had...
I have 2 sons.
Okay.
One of them is living in Goshen, Ohio. He has been with UDF for about 15 years. The other son is went after he graduated from Bowling Green State University, and his wife did also. He got into loss prevention, and he's been with Macy's, he's been with Barnes and Noble, he's been with several, and he is still in that business and has advanced, been very effective, enjoys that.
Now, you mentioned that you hadn't really talked much about your experiences until sometime in, I think you said the 80s. Had your children or grandchildren ever evidenced any interest, or do they now?
Oh, my one son, the son lives in Maryland. I think he is even like an auxiliary member of the 102nd Infantry Division Association. He was enjoyed history.
Yeah.
So, well, we talk about history a lot now. He had no idea what I had been through until after I made the tape. But he is, as I say, had been interested in history, and I don't think that I think they're going to dissolve the association finally because everyone's getting too old. See, I was probably the youngest one in the division, and some of them said that I probably shouldn't have gone over with the division, but I'm glad I did, because the worst thing in the world is being used as a replacement. This is very bad. You know people, you know the organization, you know what you're doing. If you go in as a replacement, you just don't know anything. You don't know where you are, and a lot of replacements were injured and some killed before they ever got to where they were supposed to be. Does that answer the questions pretty well?
I was just going to say, how do you think that, how do you look back on your service? You've already told us that you are glad you served. How do you feel that affected the rest of your life, either life lessons or anything else?
Well, it affects your life, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the being in the infantry, being living through the war, being in combat, learning about. You learn an awful lot about people, about not only us, but you learn more values in life. One thing I'll say, in going through houses that we were attacking, I knew that there were probably German soldiers in the basement, but there were probably also civilians. And I never threw a grenade down in that basement because it's not right to be killing civilians. Even though those people, well, a lot of them were against the United States, but a lot of them, there were a lot of relatives over here. So I feel that having served, I learned a lot.
Okay.
I have a question about the values that you perceive in your son's generation and your grandchildren's generation. You said that going through the Depression and World War II, I guess, cemented your values and made them worthwhile. What do you say about values now?
Well,
how do you teach values?
It's hard to assess values now because everything is on a different plane. 1946, I bought a brand new automobile for $1,735. That same car today would be costing around $30,000. So values have changed. All thinking has changed. Now, one thing I will be proud of, our oldest grandson has gone through college, graduated. He is now a assistant manager of a fish hatchery in West Virginia. Right now, we have 4 grandchildren in college. We have a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, and a senior in college. I feel that I'm proud of that fact, and hopefully I'm a part of having them, instilling that thought in our children and in our grandchildren that education is the most important thing. You have to learn, regardless of what you're doing. You have to learn, and you have to want to learn. That's the most important thing.
Okay. All right. And is there anything else that comes to your mind that you remember particularly unusual occurrence? You certainly described very clearly how you were injured, but anything else you can remember about your experiences over there?
Over there, I'll remember one day, about 4 of us went to, and it was in Holland, get the name of the little town there in Holland. We went into a bakery to see if we could, there were a lot of times when we couldn't get enough to eat. Sometimes they couldn't get food up to us, even our K rations. We had to dig cow beets, we called them. I don't know what they were. Anyway, had to dig those, gave us something to eat. But anyway, we went into this bakery and we had our dictionary, and Flemmy's trying to talk to this young lady who was back at the counter. Finally, she laughed and she said, "Why don't you come out and speak English?" So we had a very good conversation with her.
Did she have something to sell?
They had, yes. I'll say this, that the people in Holland recovered from the terrible treatment they had gotten from the Germans. They recovered very fast because they were out cleaning up as soon as our troops came through and chased the Germans out. They appreciated that. A lot of them had starved, but as soon as they could get foods, wheat and things, they started. And I think we did get some rolls or something that we bought from her. Another time I can remember, we were going to attack this hill, and there was a lot of firepower up there. And one thing, you never walked along the roads because the roads were tree-lined. And you had our German 88s coming in with tree bursts that were killing fields along the roads. We were moving across this field. There was a tank trap. It was 4 or 5 feet deep and 10 feet wide. And we got there, I jumped down, got up on the other side and started walking. And I was drawing a lot of firepower, a lot of fire toward me. And all at once there was a shell came sliding along. It was an armor-piercing shell. And as it passed, I looked at it, looked back. Everybody else had stopped back there, and I was standing out there alone. And they were all motioning for me to get back, so I did. But anyway, if it wouldn't have been for that shell, I probably would have kept on moving and gotten killed.
Had you ever gone back to Europe?
No, I did not. A lot of the people from the 102nd did. They've gone back. They've visited places where we were, especially Leonard. It's on the Roer River. That's R-O-E-R River, where they couldn't cross it until February. But because it was, the Germans had some dams up there controlling the water, and they kept the water level up until finally they got across there. Now, they've visited Leonard, they've visited, other cities across the Rhine. They also visited the cemetery at Margraten, Holland. This is where a lot of my friends ended up from the Battle of the Bulge, the Ardennes. That's a cemetery. I've seen pictures of it. It's well taken care of, beautiful cemetery.
Did that division go into the Battle of Belgium?
We were north of that.
Okay.
We were in the 9th Army. We were up next to the Canadian and British armies. This was called Monty's Phantom Army. We were part of that. When the Battle of the Bulge started, they did pull troops out of the 102nd and moved them, spread them out, and took other divisions that were closer to it.
Yeah. How many, you mentioned reunions. Have you gone to a number of reunions?
Yes, after 1988, that first one we went to here in Cincinnati, we've been to quite a few. Denver, San Francisco, I forget different places that we've gone.
So you were still seeing
Hampton.
people that you knew?
Yes, yes, yeah, in touch with some of those. Had in the same squad that I was in, we had twins, which was very unusual. These fellows were from St. Louis. One of them was killed, the other one wounded. And the one that lived became a minister and retired in Denver. So we have met with them several times, and other people at division reunions. Another one was Hampton, Virginia. And back in the, I'd say in the 80s up to 90, there were a lot of people attending, probably up to 1,200. But after that, it started dropping down continually. We have not gone to the last couple because it's just too hard for me and my wife also. She has a lot of arthritis to attend these meetings.
Did you see the movie Saving Private Ryan?
Yes, I did. It's very authentic. There are a lot of things in it that are very true. And I also have the Band of Brothers, but to me it seemed a little bit more Hollywood than Saving Private Ryan. In fact, I not only saw it, but I have the tape of it. I've seen it several times. Fortunately, we were able to travel a lot. Went to not only reunions, but I was involved in the lumber industry. I was president of the Ohio Lumbermen's Association in 1980. I was given up to vice president of the National Retail Lumber Dealers Association. And we got to travel, enjoyed it, learned a lot from it. So on trips that we took, even with my wife and my sons, a lot of times they would say, "What are we stopping here for?" "Well, there's a company here I want to see."
Oh, I see.
But I had them in lumber mills, things, they learned a lot from it.
So you can't say that your military service held you back too much from
No.
civilian achievement.
No. It's the desire to do something.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with us?
No, I think that covers it very well, but as I said, I thank God that I was born and raised in the United States. I saw men give their lives for this, that other people can live free. And I think that's the greatest thing.
Well, Mr. Bosserman, you've given us a very interesting and compelling story, and I personally appreciate your coming and sharing it.
All right, I tried to make it, to cover it as much as possible.
It's exactly what we wanted. Thank you.
Thank you.